So this is Erica Grigg, and I wanted to introduce you to the Epic Women podcast. This podcast is going to be interviewing and be providing advice around how women can excel from health to wealth and everything in between, how we can advance in our lives, leading the most ambitious and exciting lives of our dreams. How do we make that happen? Whether it comes from a place of balance, whether it comes from a place of motivation, and always with deep insights and lessons that women have learned, whether they are, marathon runners or they are senior leaders across the tech space, which is kind of where my network is. So inevitably, I will be interviewing a lot of tech folks. The Epic Women podcast is dedicated to enabling women to, number one, get promoted and move into positions of senior leadership. Number two, help women earn more money. And number three, to help women lead more fulfilling lives by learning from those of us who have succeeded. So we are so excited to bring you amazing and inspiring speakers. And I can't wait for you to dive in. So thank you so much for being here. I would love your feedback. In terms of social media, we are on Instagram, we're on Twitter, we're on LinkedIn, and we're going to be on YouTube as well. So please follow along, and I cannot wait to hear from you and to hear your thoughts and ideas. And I cannot wait to highlight the stories of epic women doing absolutely amazing things to inspire, motivate, and inform. I wish you the best of weeks, and I sincerely appreciate your participation. Hello and welcome to the Epic Women podcast. Today I have my first episode, and I am so excited to have been talking with Lisa Russell, who is an absolute star in the inclusion, diversity for business, and kind of with that focus on tech, to have a conversation in the first Epic Women podcast. So let me describe a little bit more about Lisa. So our first Epic Women podcast conversation is with Lisa Russell, right? So Lisa is the co-founder and CEO of Aleria, which is an HR tech company that measures inclusion in the workspace and helps leaders understand exactly how to approach DEI. Over the 10 years that I've known Lisa, we actually met in Miss Tech, which is a great organization started by Nicole Yeri. A shout out to you, Nicole. Lisa, has been a trailblazer in the field of tech and entrepreneurship, rising from the ranks within finance and then taking those skills and moving them over to entrepreneurship and entrepreneurship in the tech space, having been with several companies who were acquired. And, she has done so many amazing things. I mean, her commitment and leadership in this work has been widely recognized and awarded. You actually may have seen her on stages like South by Southwest, TechCrunch Disrupt, or Forum in the Workplace Inclusion. You may have also seen her work on Forbes, Switch, and more. She has won countless awards, including by Hive's Learning List of Most Influential D&I Leaders 3 years in a row. This portion of our conversation is just one. We had two conversations sandwiching this conversation. So I know that I'm going to be having another conversation with Lisa in Q1 in 2023. But the 5 questions that we asked and answered were just so insightful to me, and I feel like they would be helpful for both women and companies in this space who want to make more equitable workspaces, more kind workspaces. And how can they do this? How can they measure this? Well, this is exactly what Aleria is doing. And she distilled that to us. Not only her insights and wisdom around inclusion and diversity, but how she rose to the top in multiple industries. So I cannot wait for you to listen to this conversation. I can't wait for us to have another conversation with Lisa, but thank you so much for joining us for the first episode of the Epic Women podcast. And I'm really, really looking forward to the more conversations that I will have with more epic women. I will be continuing to reach out to listen to your advice on who I should be interviewing next. I love the wisdom that we are creating in this environment, in this container. So thank you again for joining us. And yeah, let's kick off the conversation. Lisa Russell, I am so excited to have Lisa Russell on the Epic Women podcast this lovely morning, coming to us from San Diego. Thank you so much, Lisa. Lisa is absolutely a trailblazer in the area of inclusion, of equity. And I am so excited to have you live here today. You have been doing so many things in the past decade plus around this area, from finance to managing your own startups to really focusing on being that social impact entrepreneur, making positivity scale, just winning so many different awards, being highlighted in so many places, from Hive to Techstars to, I can't even count. I will include a full bio video on Lisa. But yeah, Lisa, first of all, thank you so much for being here and for adding your insights and value and wisdom for, ladies globally. So I want to get into it. So Lisa, tell us, in terms of equity, of diversity, this is so important for companies, for women themselves, ourselves. So tell us, to kick things off, like, how do you define equity in business?
Yeah, thank you for having me. And I'm excited to jump right in and talk about one of our favorite topics here, equity in business. So I think an important context here is that I do run a company that measures inclusion in the workplace. And so we are very intentional about how we think about not only equity, but like how we define diversity, how we define inclusion, how we define equity, so that folks can understand the difference in them. I think that this is an area where we're seeing that a lot of folks are using whichever acronym is trendy at the time, whether it's D&I, DEI, JEDI. It keeps evolving. But it's important, if you're going to use those acronyms, to know what you're doing internally as an organization for each one if you're going to carry the acronym. And so for me, to get to equity, you really have to understand diversity and inclusion. So to me, diversity is a measure of how an individual's personal characteristics differ from the normative majority group in an organization. So we're really thinking about like those personal characteristics. And those can be visible or non-visible, but really just like are foundational to who you are. Whereas inclusion, to me, that is looking at the act of ensuring that people around you are not having a different experience as a result of those personal characteristics. So really paying attention to the day-to-day experiences and interactions of humans and seeing, like, are they being provided a different experience because of a personal characteristic or because of who they are? And then with that in mind, equity really is like asking us to acknowledge that everyone has a different need, that has different experiences and has different opportunities in front of them. And so if we're going to define equity in an organization, we're really thinking about it as the creation and the design of systems and maybe interventions that are aiming to address that like imbalance that exists. And so looking at, what are the systems, what are the processes that we need to create that take into account the fact that like some folks face different structural barriers, or some folks have different needs, different preferences. And it's all about making sure that we're not just handing everyone the same recipe, but really understanding what do they actually need to arrive at the same destination.
And on a day-to-day basis, that means if you have kids, having a flexible schedule, and we will kind of continue this conversation, what that means on a day-to-day basis. But if we're thinking about, and Aleria is thinking about measuring equity, how do you do that? And, what are the kind of statistics that go about measuring equity in different workplaces?
Yeah, so you may find that many organizations are tracking basic representation metrics, right? They're paying attention to like what percentage of the employees in our company are women, or what percentage of the company's organizational like roles are being held by someone who identifies as LGBTQIA plus, so whatever it might be that they feel comfortable as an organization holding, they're probably starting there. What we're trying to encourage folks to do as they're looking to increase how they're defining DEI and how they're going about it, and how they're measuring the impact that those initiatives have in the organization, is pay attention to not only the representation metrics, not only data that's around like employee satisfaction or engagement type surveys, but really paying attention to like, how do we quantify the day-to-day experiences of individuals and where that leads them in terms of access and participation in the organization. So for us at Aleria, we very specifically measure inclusion in the workplace. And so we are looking at having employees self-describe moments that they experience on a day-to-day basis in a company, and letting us know how they fall across what we call the categories of inclusion. So we're just looking at like 8 categories, 8 common groupings of experiences, things like recognition or respect or work-life balance or skills use and assignments. These are just some examples of like types of areas where employees might be having a day-to-day experience, or where they feel like they have a different level of access or participation. So in practice, like what we're saying is like an employee might say something like, today I was in a meeting and my direct manager took credit for my work, and that didn't feel great, and so we're looking to understand which of those categories does it have to do with. So that might have to do with recognition, that might have to do with skills use and assignments, or maybe promotions, because they've been trying to get a promotion and feel like if they're not getting recognized, they're not going to ever arrive in that place. And so we're trying to understand like what does this have to do with, but also what is the source of exclusion in that moment? Like who or what's causing you to feel excluded? So in that narrative, it was the direct manager who, quite literally took credit for a task or an accomplishment. And so your direct manager might have been the source of exclusion. In other scenarios, it might be a customer or a policy or HR or leadership, right? And then we're trying to tease apart like frequency and like, is this impacting more people or just you? And all of that allows us to basically get to like our custom metrics for like how we benchmark across those categories. But any organization can start to pay attention to like, how do we really understand where folks are having a different experience on a day-to-day basis, and start to like look at the gap, like which groups of individuals are having a different experience in our company. So a lot of times we're just looking to like bring everyone up to the same level as a starting place. So if we see that meetings are a common source of exclusion in your organization, can we just start by creating more inclusive meeting practices? Or if we see that folks with children are feeling like they can't make this 8 a.m. stand up every week because they're dropping their kids off at school, is there something that we can do in that narrative to change the policy or process around that to make sure that everyone has equal access to that moment in the company? And so really just looking to tease apart those experiences in any way that you can.
Interesting. And so, when we're talking about the actions that companies can take, whether that's senior leadership or, within companies themselves, and equitable leadership is just so important. And, this conversation of equity is honestly, frankly, it's very important from the leadership perspective. So can you tell us more about what does equitable leadership look like and why that is so important?
Yeah, it absolutely is important. It's, we always anecdotally hear like, that things start from the top, right? That you have to like lead by example, or like, that organizations really shift by having leadership buy-in. There's all these different ways that we're thinking about it, but saying the same thing. And I think that in our work, we're seeing something that's very similar, but just to kind of add it to the stack of evidence, we're seeing that in most organizations, it is direct managers or leadership teams that are the most cited source of exclusion in an organization, in every single organization we've ever been in. And that tells me that if you're looking for kind of like low-hanging fruit in terms of like how to accomplish or create a more inclusive work environment, we have to start with the day-to-day interactions that deal with leadership. It's like leading by example becomes even more important. And so if I was to say, what is equitable leadership to me? I start to think about it as really kind of like 3 connected I think, things. The first one is like, you have to be very intentional around the values of the company and kind of like culture design. Like you have to be very intentional. Like, this is what I want the organization to look like. This is what I want the organization to feel like. This is what I want my employees to believe in. And so really kind of being intentional and documenting that and being very open and communicating that openly with the organization frequently is really important. The next thing is really around listening to employees, like being willing to take feedback, being willing to like provide feedback, being deeply curious, but also humble enough to acknowledge when you hear something that like, maybe hurts a little bit, or like something that doesn't align with like your perception of the organization and what it looks like. Because I think that like, that's where, if you start to build that sense of trust and openness and transparency, you're going to start to get more and more of that like feedback that like, maybe, you're just like, like that one didn't feel very good. But more importantly, it's like what you do with that information. So many companies are collecting data from their employees. They're like, employees are like over surveyed at this point in many organizations. They're giving this information. They're giving feedback in the format that they're being asked to give it in. But the reality is, it's not driving the change that they expect to see from that. Like, if I tell you that I'm having this challenge, what are you doing about it? Like, what's next, right? And if I keep doing that on repeat and nothing changes, I start to feel like my opinion doesn't matter, or they don't actually care to fix this problem that I'm having. So the difference there is that willingness to act on that information, that willingness to drive process and policy changes based on the feedback of your employees, not based on your own perception or interest in the company. And so like that connectiveness of like, this is what we're going to be as an organization. Please, I want to hear your thoughts. Give me feedback. And then I'm going to change. I'm going to make sure that we're addressing the things that I hear about. That collectively creates what I envision as equitable leadership. But I'm sure there's a lot more to that in terms of like value systems, like transparency, flexibility, like psychological safety. Like we could go on forever. Yeah.
And do you think that leaders into 2023, because things have changed so much in the past 2 years in our workspaces, our lives, do you think going into 2023, that is equitable leadership is great leadership? Do you think those two are synonymous?
I think that they're definitely related. Like I would say that a great leader is someone who is approaching their role in an equitable way, and increasingly trying to, I think that like, it's the reason I'm struggling to say like yes is because I think it's something that's really hard to just like land and achieve or to like own. It should be like a process. Like you should always find and be looking for more and more ways that you can be increasing the level of inclusive and equitable experiences in the organization. So I don't think it's somewhere where you can just like own it and like you get your equitable leadership badge. But I think that the last 2 years, like the things that like jump out as me as like being slightly different or like really important for the year ahead based on how things are shifted is like definitely this idea of like responsible leadership, meaning like understanding that the economic situation that we're in and making decisions that don't put your employees at risk unnecessarily is like something that I think more and more business leaders need to own that responsibility. And understand that they probably have a different relationship with risk than their average employee. And that's kind of hard to process at times, but like, it's really, really important if you're going to be an equitable leader is like understanding that ripple effect, that impact, and how different folks carry that. And the other thing is that since so many people have shifted to remote work or hybrid work for the first time, we're seeing that there's a need for very like intentional and proactive systems of recognition. If you're used to like just seeing people, at the office and like casually getting that moment, that like contact of small talk or eye to eye, acknowledgement, or like that pat on the back and, whatever other like cheesy things might happen in offices. I don't know. I haven't been in one in a very long time, but like, it's like, I just, you get the sense that like people get that, like that bit of praise, that bit of like recognition in passing that no longer exists. So you have to go out of your way to make sure and to communicate very clearly that you see them, that they're contributing, that they're doing a great job, that like you're proud of them, that you appreciate their contributions. And so just being very, very like almost like over communicative like around recognition and acknowledgement is going to make a big, big difference and is absolutely necessary in the shifting ways that we're working right now. And that's only made better by like increased systems of like transparency, and just like a tendency to over communicate anyway is going to create that so that it feels more natural, as opposed to just like I think in some like stuffy environments, it's like if all of a sudden I'm giving you a compliment, it feels weird, it like feels out of place. And so you don't want to be that. So like creating that space so that it's normal and comfortable so that other folks can, like we're saying, lead from the top. It's like if you're creating that muscle of like, we recognize contributions openly and freely and often, everyone else will start doing it as well.
That is deep insight. And that's one that I just have not heard a lot around recognition, and that's free. That when you communicate about something, when you tell somebody that you're proud of them, that is not something that you need to pay for. And that is so pricelessly valuable.
It absolutely is.
We don't hear it. We don't hear it enough. I think that's important. That was just an aha. And so when we're talking about companies creating these inclusive environments in 2023, you talk about those 8 categories of inclusivity. Do you think maybe you can talk a little bit more about those? And do you think about helping companies create this inclusive environment? I've heard just so many insights from you around listening to employees, but is there maybe anything else that, maybe around the 8 categories that companies might do to further create these inclusive environments?
Yeah, so when we're looking at the categories of inclusion, we've already actually talked about a couple of them. We just didn't, make it so clear, but we're often like measuring the day-to-day experiences of employees, but then we're putting them into those categories. And it is things like recognition is one, which is why it comes up so much for us, because like we're very confident and clear and have the data to support that recognition is a shifting and growing opportunity for organizations. It's respect. It comes down to like the day-to-day interactions of individuals and like whether you're communicating and being considerate in how you're doing things. And so respect is a really common category that we're paying attention to. We're looking at skills use and assignments. Like, do people feel like their contributions, their skills are being valued and that they're being challenged and given growth opportunities? Similarly, career opportunities and like promotion. So like, are they able to like grow in the role? Are you putting them on a track where they can move up at the same pace as others? And then we're looking at things like compensation, but also work-life balance. And so understanding that those two things are very different, but can oftentimes like feel like a compensation package collectively. But work-life balance really has a lot more to do with just like a sense of understanding, flexibility, having autonomy over how and when you work. And so increasingly we're seeing work-life balance, particularly in the last couple of years, become a value or an area where employees can have those like really easy, cheap wins if they would just, create a different system or way of working. But yeah, so across those, in terms of other tips, I think that the biggest thing that I can give you is like, just know that like leadership and direct managers are often at the top, driving more frequent experiences of exclusion. So it's important to pay attention to how you empower like direct managers to lead their teams. They're often like stuck in this like complex like middle zone where it's like they're getting the directive from the top. They're trying to like manage and keep their employees happy. They're like careful. They have a lot of responsibility, but at the same time, it's like so important that they like do their job well. And that is to manage people and empower people to do their job well. And so it's like, just understanding like, what does it mean to be a direct manager? How can leadership teams empower them to communicate freely and openly, but also to be the point where we get that feedback and like kind of like feed information back up. But I think direct managers and empowering direct managers to be champions for their team is like a massive opportunity. But alongside, systems of recognition, work-life balance right now is super, super important.
Wow. I tell you, working in so many different environments, that just what you're talking about just makes an environment feel so safe. And the work that obviously that employees will do is just so much better when they have this feeling of psychological safety. Now, for the ladies who are interested and keen on gaining a promotion, considering that you have done so many things in your career and you've moved and elevated your career and advanced your career in so many ways strategically, I would love your advice as a leader, a senior leader, on, what would you recommend ladies be doing now to get that promotion in 2023?
Yeah. I I think that a couple things come to mind. My earliest career days, I was in financial services by the time I was 19. And was often the only woman in a room, but often like half the age of other folks in most rooms, right? And so it was an interesting dynamic to be working in, but also to be trying to work up, in. And so the things that I can remember from that time that seem to stand true in my work in tech startups as well, and I'm trying to like validate that as I'm saying it out loud, is really this idea of understanding that the system that you're working in, that like corporate America, framework of sorts, was not designed for you. It was designed with someone else in mind. And there are a lot of policies and processes in place, but like they weren't designed for you. And so you don't necessarily have to follow that path or like fight against it. I am very much a believer of finding a way to like present your value, like create your own path to the top. And so for me in financial services, as an example, that really meant that like I was at the time just like I saw all the ways that I could be working more efficiently. I was like baffled as to like why things weren't automated. I was confused as to why we weren't doing things at scale, why we weren't like analyzing numbers every week as a team. Like to me, I just saw all these opportunities to just improve how we were functioning. And so I just created them. I was like, yes, technically that would have, been my manager's job or like that manager's job at the moment. But I was like, let me just develop this system myself, use it myself, prove that it works, express like the value in like automating and like, optimizing in these ways, using these systems and tools that exist, and then like let it speak for itself. And that's what happened. And I worked my way up really, really fast in finance. I was managing sales and marketing for a broker dealer by the time I was 23, and reporting to the CEO. And that had everything to do with the fact that I was confident in systems, processes, and I was willing to do the work to demonstrate that I had ideas that were going to pay off for the company. And so I would, that probably looks different in different organizations and in different roles. But I think the lesson there is that this process was not designed for me. And I was not going to move up at the same rate that I wanted to because everyone else was following those processes. Instead, I just said, nope, let me show you. I deserve to be at the top. Here's this thing. And I found ways to demonstrate that value and my different, like the way in which I could add value at the top. And so create your own path. Go out of your way to demonstrate how you're going to do things differently or better. And then be willing to like do a bit of work to just prove that they're valuable, because it's going to be different. So people are going to be like, what are you talking about? We're not trying to like break everything that's working right now, and just show them, I trust in you. I think that, if you feel it's going to be better, it probably will be. And just demonstrate that. And the other thing that we hear all the time, which I, certainly don't want to be a broken record around, but like finding a champion to like say your name in rooms that you're not yet in and to like speak to your value is just super, super like important. And again, one of those things where it's like, it's not just like being assigned a mentor. It's like, you have to build that relationship. You want them to know you. You want that person to believe in you. You want that person to be like committed to your success. And so intentionally creating time and making sure that you're staying in contact and over communicating with that person so that they can be your champion is really important and helpful as well.
I hear the go-gettingness of not only your attitude, but your confidence, and, and seeing that in your career and seeing that in, all the work that you and your team are doing with Aleria. I have appreciated this so, so much. It has been so insightful and mind-blowing on how companies can do this, and, how we can also do the work. Because I think sometimes ultimately it is the ladies and it is different folks who actually are doing a lot of the work and the kind of the back end to help incite these things to change, so yeah. I really want to thank you firstly for joining us here, and I'm just so excited, and we will definitely be sharing and promoting the great work that you are doing on Epic Women, and I appreciate it so, so much, Lisa. It's been so fun.
Yes, I appreciate it. It's wonderful. And if I can be helpful to anyone, please reach out. Yeah.
Awesome. Okay, thank you.